I've always wanted to start a cult. And I know that probably sounds bad, and maybe it is, but riddle me this. Why should I care if owning a cult is bad? Checkmate. However, there's another thing about me that you should know. I'm not charismatic enough to start a cult. If I was a Fallout character, every single one of my points would be in perception, because I see everything. I even see you, right now, eating lunch. You have food between your teeth, and honestly, that's kind of gross. You should probably do something about that. So what does any of this charisma stuff have to do with today's video? Well, I'm glad you asked, because today I'm going to be starting a cult, but not in real life, because as I said before, I have no charisma. No, silly. I'm going to be starting a cult in a video game. If you haven't guessed it already, I'm playing the Cult of the Lamb in this video. This game starts just like any other great game does, and that's with the execution of your character. I was eager to get my mutton chopped, so I went down my path to my execution just like a lamb to the...
God damn it, I thought I told you to remove that line. You did? Alright, well then, why do I see like a lamb to the slaughter in the script? Well, I don't know. I told you how terrible that line was, and you did not remove it. Look, no, I'm sorry, just please don't fire me, I really need this job. You're lucky to even be here, intern. Okay, I know. You're on thin ice, buddy. Thin ice.
Sorry about that. I just had to go let my dog out real quick. Where was I? Oh yeah, I was getting sliced in half like an apple in Fruit Ninja. There were 4 goofy-looking priests watching my execution too, but I didn't really pay much attention to them, mainly because I was too busy thinking about the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, and thousands of lives that would be ultimately cut short by the hazardous chemicals released as a result of railway deregulation. While dark clouds of despair were clouding my thoughts, it turned out that I had been carved up like a turkey. During my brief visit with the afterlife, I met a giant cat who offered me limitless power in return for starting a cult, and in my mind, this was a win-win scenario. So, I accepted the cat's offer and returned to life. Now that I was back, it was time to start tearing woodland creatures limb from limb like the resurrected lamb corpse that I am. Before I could really get into the murderous mood, I was greeted by my new best friend, Ratau. Ratau also owned a cult for a bit, but gave up on it to do some of the simpler things in life, like gambling, but don't worry, we'll get there. Eventually, after a bit of dialogue, Ratau turned me loose on the whimsical creatures of the forest once again. After obliterating local wildlife, I stumbled across a sentient cowman about to face the same fate that I did like 5 minutes ago. After killing the cow's captors, I went up to comfort it and tell it everything was okay. Nah, I'm just messing with you. What I actually did was open a demonic portal underneath the cow and teleport it to the location where I would break its mind and force it into servitude. This cult thing is pretty cool. After giving the gift of cult membership to the cow, I was finally free of the woods. I emerged into the beautiful clearing that Ratau showed me in a sort of tutorial, and during this tutorial, I got to meet my first cultist. The cow was named Phaetar when I first met it. However, now that I rescued the cow, I was given the incredible opportunity to name it. I sat there pondering possible names for at least a minute, and eventually I thought of the perfect name for this cow that was both creative and meaningful. Yeah, I named the cow Fart. What the hell are you gonna do about it? I'm playing the game, not you. If you want to name the cow Gregory or something stupid like that, get the game yourself. After that, I had to do some dumb tutorial stuff, like making a shrine for the cultists to worship, and a kitchen that I could cook food in, and blah blah blah. What I was really itching to do was go back into the woods and kill more monsters, and that's exactly what I did the second I was done with tutorial activities. I ran around the dark woods for a bit, and then just as quickly as it had started, the facade was up. The leafy bush bishop emerged from the ground and saw me running around about twice as alive as I was the last time he saw me. This one's called Leshy, and he left me trying to intimidate me, but luckily I can't be intimidated because I'm too stupid to know when someone else is being serious. To prove how not intimidated I went on to challenge the first mini-boss of Darkwood. Leshy was actually waiting for me in the arena, and thought he was doing something really cool when he turned a cultist named Amdusius into a worm, but I wasn't having any of it, and carved up Amdusius like a Thanksgiving turkey. To even further humiliate Leshy, I then abducted and indoctrinated Amdusius into my cult. However, I didn't want Amdusius to keep his old name because it was both cringe and a mouthful, so I changed his name to James Monroe, after the 5th president of the United States. After indoctrinating a president, it was finally time to build a place of worship in my cult, so I built the Triangle. I can't imagine a more beautiful place to give off my evil and malicious doctrines than a goddamn triangle. So I did just that, and as I was telling my doctrine, I began to float in the air. What was bro saying, you might ask? Great question. I'll give you a little sample of exactly what I was preaching in that temple.
My goblins, ghouls, and gabagools, there always comes a time in our lives when we are faced with a decision. A decision to cower in fear from who we truly are, or to drive around in an Uber playing the brown note and only the brown note on the radio. Yes, there are times when in order to show our true faith to others, we must, without pause mind you, play the song of our people loudly for others to enjoy. Just the other day, I was driving for Uber and a young man entered into my vehicle. Immediately, this young man asked me what I was playing on the radio, to which I responded, "Why, the brown note, of course." Immediately, with a face of bewilderment, the young man put his nose in the air like a basset hound and realized that I had deposited my faith into my pants. Inquisitively, the young man asked me, "Sir, I believe that you have shat yourself." To which I laughed and I responded, "He who throws the first shit must first check to see that his own trousers are not soiled." And the man shifted uncomfortably to realize that it was not my faith that he was smelling, but instead, it was his own. Upon realizing this, the lad looked at me with tears streaming down his face, and asked me to forgive him for having soiled my pristine white seats. And as any good minister of the faith would, I responded to him with, "All is forgiven in the cult of the Lamb," and he requested that his destination be changed to wherever the cult goes. Thank you, Fart, for allowing me to tell your story before the congregation today, and thank all of you for your continued service to our beautiful cult.
With the faith of my people emboldened, I was able to get a few upgrades and go back out into the woods. While in the woods, I gathered some chunks of rock and also defeated and kidnapped another mini-boss, who I renamed from Valafar to Valafart, keeping in the theme of the cult. I also found another cultist in the same run that I named Hors because they were a horse. Pretty groundbreaking stuff here. I also realized that my cultists couldn't sleep, so I made a few beds for them to sleep in, and the entire cult was so excited about these that they immediately did the gritty all the way over to the beds. Now that my followers could sleep, I had to go declare baby's first cult doctrine. For this one, I made the revelation to my followers that having a cool bonfire can be fun. I'm out here innovating, and my followers are eating it up like animals at a trough. After my doctrine, Ratau stopped to tell me the real purpose of everything I'm doing: collecting bones. Now this is a game for all the boys out there. I know I've been bored as hell at home, work, or school, and have daydreamed about going out to collect bones. I also know that every other boy out there is in the exact same situation as me, and there's no way that I'm the only one who relates to this exact situation in which I need to collect bones in order to be happy. So, now that I realized that this game is actually a bone collection simulator, I was ready to hit the forest and rescue a couple new cultists. One a war orphan, and the other a giant groundworm monster. The first of the two I named Anemia because their original name, Anmaron, resembled anemia enough for me to think that that fit. The second was originally named Barbatos, and I just thought it would be funny to name them the rock eyebrow emoji, but when I entered it, I just got a square, so I decided that this guy would just be named. Eager to get this video done in a somewhat timely manner, I instantly hopped right back into the woods to finally face the first bishop. Along the way, I picked up a couple more stragglers like the fox who got stuck in a spider web, but finally it was time for my first real boss fight. My goofy little lamb stood in the circle and watched the towering door to the bishop's temple open. I was ready for war, and war I got. Not only did this boss look insanely cool, but this fight had some of the most insane boss music that I've heard in a bit. It sounded like it was just made for someone to lay down the most historically altering freestyle verse of all time, and it was in this game about being a lamb owning a cult. Not only was the music fire, but the ending of this fight was metal as fuck too. I land the final blow, Leshy screams in agony, and I remove his heart from his freshly exploded corpse. I felt like a kid in a water park fishing a magical brown log out of the splash zone. After dismembering a plant, I went home to, quote, double it and give it to the next person by planting a fresh garden. I also welcomed a couple new cultists named Panama Canal and Jorts. There are a lot of cultists throughout this game, so I'ma just say their names and move on, even if they're super unhinged like Panama Canal. I also dripped out my lame wooden lamb and put it up a few pegs on the Mohs hardness scale. Now that my cult was pretty self-dependent, Ratau finally thought I was a good enough boy to invite me to his shack in the middle of the woods. Usually, this is a red flag, but instead of doing unspeakable things to me, he introduced me to my favorite pastime in the world: gambling. Sadly, unlike the blackjack tables that I run, I got my cheeks clapped by Ratau on this knucklebone setup. Well, I mean, as I was saying, I guess I'm just not that much of a knuckle boner.
Dude, that joke was the most low-hanging fruit I have ever seen. Ever. Well, I mean, they laughed, didn't they? I mean, it did get a standing ovation. See, alright, I can write for you just fine. Well, yeah, maybe I got a couple of laughs, but it doesn't stand up to the high level of quality that I strive to produce on this here channel, alright? You're meaning to tell me that the joke that I just wrote on that script there was worse than you pretending to breastfeed a soccer ball in the last video? Okay, alright. That bit in the last video was a timeless classic. Nobody ever before in the history of comedy has called themselves a single mother sweeter than honey on a hot summer's day, alright? Watch yourself. I don't know, I'm just saying, maybe I should take over the comedy. Alright, shut the fuck up and be glad I haven't fired you yet. This thin ice you're on is starting to crack, alright, buddy?
God, kids these days, man, am I right? Now that I had lost all my worth being a dysfunctional knuckle boner, I decided to venture into the swamp of this game, Anura. My first Anura run wasn't very eventful. I ran into the new bishop for the area, Heket, and she made one of my cultists really hungry, which was kind of sad. And after this introduction, I got to fight the first mini-boss of this area, Gujin, which I eventually renamed to Ford Fusion, like the car, but not actually because it's a weird little bush frog. However, I had the new and unique opportunity to go fishing for the first time like an honest man should. So I went to the docks and cast my line into the great vastness of water. And after fishing, I decided to enter the weird lighthouse on the shore and showed the cultists inside of it that you can't use prayers to fuel a lighthouse and instead introduce the concept of firewood. After all this fishing business, I became a bit thirsty, however, and decided that the only thing that could quench this thirst was blood. The blood of a follower, to be exact. So, I took the silly little fox that I saved from a spiderweb earlier and fed them to an eldritch horror on the other side of a demonic portal. This was pretty fucking sweet. Now it was time to re-enter the swamp. When exploring, I discovered a troop of mushroom people, and they told me to seek out their fearless leader who really loves collecting mushrooms. Now, they thought I was a fool, and assumed that I wouldn't see how mushroomy their supple little bodies were, but I am no fool. And like an American soldier in My Lai on March 16, 1968, which just happens to be my birthday, but in a different year, fun fact, I cut down all of the civilians without remorse. I love unpunished American war crimes. I mean, woefully underpunished American war crimes because one guy got a little slap on the wrist. The evil of war crimes aside, after my little war crime, I was given a little more than enough mushrooms to impress the mushroom leader later on. I guess the screams of innocent mushroom men that now stick with me to this day were actually all for something. A little later, I came across the remaining 3 bishops, and they asked me to bend my knee to them, and like the cool badass action hero that I am, I obviously said no. This pissed Heket off, and she changed every room in my path into a normal battle room. Kind of a bitch move if you ask me, but I still managed to claw my way through the rooms and reach the next mini-boss, Elagos, who gave me a little bit of trouble, but I managed to sleep him without dying. Upon returning home, I declared some new doctrine about feasting, and instantly jumped back into Anura. While I was there, I met an old man who was going through it. He was doing everything short of blasting All Girls Are the Same by Juice WRLD while crying about some love that he lost long ago. After trying to comfort him, I went back off into the world to find and face this run's mini-boss, Zapar. This one was so disgustingly easy that it took me less than 30 seconds, and I kind of even felt bad. After the Zapar fight, I finally went to the Mushroom Man and returned him the carcasses of his followers. He didn't seem to mind, and even gave me a rare item, so no hard feelings, I guess. After metaphorically feeding a pig bacon, it was time to go back to Anura and finally fight Heket. I was super excited to fight Heket after the game design boner that Leshy gave me, and I was not disappointed. Not only was Heket a frog, which is already a huge win in my book, but her patterns were fun and interesting, and also very different from what Leshy's were. My favorite part of the fight was the ending where Heket just kind of looks like she's doubling over from a bit of heartburn, and suddenly just explodes. Whatever the heartburn was like, I figured I could weaponize it, so I decided to actually rip her heart from her carcass for my own uses. But I also got something even better than a beating heart from Heket, and it was the first cultist customization that I actually got excited about. I got a fucking capybara skin. You don't even understand how hyped I was about this, because I really like capybaras, and that's a really unique thing about me. I'm probably the only person in the world to really like capybaras. With the capybara secured and Heket dead, I could finally enter the next zone, Anchor Deep. But before I could go there, I had to declare some doctrine, and the one I chose determined that grass is actually pretty tasty. No idea how the actual barnyard herbivore-ass animals in my cult hadn't figured that one out yet, but now I never had to worry about food again. With that worry gone from my mind, I could now actually go to Anchor Deep, where I was greeted by Calamar, the 3rd bishop. She immediately introduced herself by giving my cultists the stomach flu, which is kind of a lame superpower, but to each their own, I guess. Just because I thought Calamar was so lame, I went and eviscerated her first henchman, Celios. Celios was actually a bit difficult, but with a well-placed 360 no-scope, I managed to montage on that loser. When I returned to my people, I made them a bunch of bowls of grass to eat and instantly hopped right back into Anchor Deep. But this time I found Clunko and Bop, which made my whole entire day. Clunko and Bop are some of Ratao's knuckleboner friends, and they challenged me to a duel. I kindly told them that I'm currently recovering from a gambling addiction and would not be attending the event, and little Bop on top of Clunko's head called me a bitch. Great way to start a run. However, this run didn't take very long before I ran into Calamar again. Feeling extra yucky, she decided to get 5 of my boys sick this time instead of just 1, and honestly it was just kinda gross and weird. Taking the uncomfortable feeling that I got from that encounter to the mini-boss, I managed to still squeak out a pretty easy win. However, back at home there was trouble brewing, and by that I mean, I guess everybody was pretty busy eating each other's puke because now there were 7 cultists sick and I had not really done anything about it, really. I told all of them to sleep, but there was still a 7 sick to 9 total cultist ratio, or more than 3/4 of my cultists were sick. So I solved the problem in the best way I could. I let in more cultists so that the number would seem smaller relative to my followers. In order, I added these cultists: El Jefe, Z Fart, Saliva, Pubic Hair, who I made a capybara, Harbor, Tree, and Capybara, who was naturally a capybara. Now with 16 cultists, less than half of them were sick, so all was good. With the sickness problem swept under the rug, I could finally return to Anchor Deep and find Calamar again. Interestingly, Calamar didn't make any of my cultists sick this time. Instead, she just pleaded for her life, which kinda made going to kill her seem a little less cool. She knew how cool and strong I was, and decided that she couldn't take me and decided to cry instead. I get it, but it still looks really lame. After my 3rd Calamar encounter, I also encountered Plimbo, who was a cool pirate who smuggles goods. Now that I had met everyone there was to meet, I could go fight Balls-Above, who was yet another squid. The squid theme of this area was kind of evident at this point, and I was starting to become more and more afraid of what would happen if I lost to a boss.
Bro, intern, what does that even mean? You know, like squids have tentacles, tentacle hentai, you know. What? What are you talking about? No, you already started this. You put it in the script to my video. Tell me what you mean. Well, come on man, spit it out. So basically, it's animated Japanese pornography. Alright, and now look me in the eyes and tell me why you would make a reference to that. Well, I don't know, it was funny if people got it. Okay, alright. I have a creative exercise for you. It'll force you to think like a normal person, alright? Okay, what do you want me to do? Alright, so take one hand, rub your tummy, take the other hand, pat your head, alright? It'll separate the halves of your brain, alright? Okay, yeah, no, this is pretty easy. Okay, now take your 2 hands and switch up what you're doing. It'll make the halves of your brain separate even more, alright? Oh, yeah, no, that's a little difficult. And now that should separate the halves of your brain even further, you fucking moron. Oh my god, I'm writing the rest of this script. Jesus Christ.
Once I returned home to Virginia, it was time to name Balls-Above something cool and or revolutionary. So I came up with my magnum opus. I decided to change their name to, drumroll please, Balls Bob. #1 name in the world. People will be naming their kids Balls Bob for generations to come. With Balls Bob named, I went back to Anchor Deep and eventually ran into Shamura, the 4th bishop. They basically told me that Calamar was a bitch and that I should go kill her soon. Shamura is by far the most based of the bishops, and I'm a little sad that I've got to kill them later on. Now, I finally got to fight Calamar, and I discovered that she is not actually a weak little bitch, but instead a magnificently strong girl boss who gaslit and gatekept me so hard with her huge sword that she murdered me in cold blood. That's right. The first death that I experienced to this game was to the one that everybody called a weak little loser. That makes you feel good. Defeated and sad, I respawned at my cult and was instantly met by my boy Pubic Hair, who was hankering for a snack. This snack that he wanted was nothing other than literal shit, and I am not even joking. Bro pulled me aside to say, "I've always wanted to eat a meal made out of poop." I'm pretty sure that I'm the first person in the world to say that my boy Pubic Hair was hankering for a snack made of literal shit, and I'll just wear that badge with pride. I happily fed my cultist shit, and he ate it up as though it was not shit, but instead it was McDonald's cheeseburger. I also accepted a new cultist who was an alligator, and I named him Alligator. But honestly, I didn't really care about that because I just watched an anthropomorphic capybara eat literal shit out of a bowl that I cooked. Deciding that I was now ready for anything and had learned a deep and valuable lesson, I went back to challenge Calamar again. This time, I was prepared to see and experience anything, and my new openness of mind allowed me to kill her with health to spare. I will admit, this was a super interesting boss fight because it featured attack patterns that didn't resemble any patterns of the enemies throughout the level. So I thought the originality of the Calamar boss fight was super cool and interesting. You could say that she had a lot of heart heart, and now that she was dead, I could harvest her heart and use it for my own benefit. When I got home, I learned to my dismay that one of my followers that had been with me for a very long time had in fact become old. Valifart was on his last legs, and I realized that I needed to give him an ending fit for a king. So, I decided to declare a new doctrine that allowed me to send him directly to the afterlife without pain. Or at least I thought without pain. Jesus Christ! The second that he rose majestically through the ceiling, I was met with the most gut-wrenching sound I had heard in my entire life. I'm starting to think that the afterlife that I'd been promising my followers wasn't eternal happiness. It was an eternal meat grinder that would allow you to live out the rest of eternity as 96% lean ground beef, which, even though that may be my fantasy, probably isn't everyone's fantasy, and I was starting to feel bad. To clear my mind, I entered the last level of the game, Silk Cradle. And the moment I entered the location, I was met by the 4th bishop. Their name was Shamura, and they revealed to me that the giant scary cat that gave me my powers actually used to be a bishop and would try to kill me in the end. Little did Shamura know, I was already planning on beating the shit out of that cat, so it was no big deal to me. However, Shamura then did something unforgivable, and that was turning my beloved follower against me in a fight to the death. Obviously, I was able to dispatch the follower with ease, since I'm just stronger than everything else. But the fact that Shamura took control of my friend's mind put them at the very top of my I need to kill you so hard that people forget who you are list. It was also in Silk Cradle that I learned how severely underpowered I was. The enemies were taking 10 or so hits to kill, and I wasn't even using the dagger, so my teeth began to chatter as I was a little scared. But even though I was super scared and worried, I was a brave little boy and went on to fight the next mini-boss, Folklore. Luckily, this boss had super easy attack patterns, and I destroyed it in 3 minutes flat. Regardless of how that fight went, I was feeling pretty weak, and back in Virginia, which is the name of my cult if you forgot, I learned that my influence was also getting pretty weak. My very first follower, Fart, had come to despise me and was attempting to organize a coup d'etat. This broke my heart so severely that I decided to build a prison and lock Fart in it for multiple days without food, so that maybe he'd love me again and the cult would welcome him with open arms. Somehow, this strategy even worked, which was wild, but I'm not complaining because I just got my friend back. While Fart was in prison, I also declared a doctrine in my temple telling my followers to do mushrooms, and that was kinda sick. However, even with all of these things, I was starting to feel like my cult didn't respect me anymore, so I decided that it was time to sacrifice someone. Jorts, a longtime member of the cult, had recently reached old age, and I felt like the tentacle monster in the floor was probably getting a little hungry, so I fed the beast. It's not like I enjoyed doing it, but I didn't want more people to go fartist and start uprisings. Now that I had instilled fear of me in my cult once again, I decided to go back to Silk Cradle. While I was there, I met Shamura once again, and they asked me to bow down, and since I hate them for what they did to my cultist, I said no and had to fight for an extra room. However, I crushed this room easily and went on to fight the next mini-boss, which was a huge caterpillar named Vefar. This one was pretty easy, and I easily crushed it with my huge hammer. After committing war crimes with my hammer, I learned that one of my followers was deeply in love with another one and wanted some flowers to profess his love. So I said yes to the quest. I actually had zero intention of going to get the flowers, and never did, but it's the gesture that counts. I was also pretty bored of just sitting in Virginia, so I decided to go and meet Plimbo for the first time in Smuggler's Sanctuary. I decided to wander around a little bit, and eventually met an evil-looking fox in the water. Turns out the man was just hungry, and you're not yourself when you're hungry, so I gave him a Snickers bar. He ominously told me that we would meet again, and disappeared, so I'm not sure what's gonna happen with that guy in the future. I also paid a visit to Midas's cave, since I hadn't been there yet, finally rounding off my exploration. I may or may not have accidentally turned a longtime follower into a golden statue, but we all make mistakes sometimes, right? Since I didn't really feel like being questioned now, I went back to Silk Cradle, and Shamura made one final mistake. They decided to turn not just one of my followers on me, but 2. I just want to have a small funeral for all of the cultists that Shamura has cost me so far. Now that I was thoroughly pissed off, I had to go fight another mini-boss, and my judgment was heavily clouded by race, and I managed to die. However, I had a comically bloody bishop heart in my back pocket, and when I used it, I gained the ability to sacrifice my cultists to come back to life. Now, I didn't really want to do this, but I was also way too lazy to run the whole level again, so I decided that I could just feed the tentacle monster again and sacrifice my old friend Panama Canal. However, just like an anime or something, my strength was renewed and I fought with Panama Canal's spirit in me, and with the power of friendship, we killed the giant scorpion named named Horace or Auris or something like that. Now, it was time to gear up for the Shamura boss fight so that I could finally avenge my fallen boys. To prepare, I sent a cultist to the great food processor in the sky, and using the new resurrection ritual, I single-handedly brought Panama Canal back. Call me Teddy Roosevelt. With everything back to the way it should be, I finally trekked off to face the one creature responsible for all of my pain and suffering. Then, I came face to face with them, and Shamura looked me in the eyes and called me a little bitch and dared me to come kill them. I was happy to oblige and forged my way through the whole level with nothing but vengeance in my heart. Luckily for me, Shamura was an incredibly easy boss for someone of my caliber. I was zipping and weaving between attacks, easily dodging almost all of them. I even found time to hit a sick 360 no-scope, easily dealing more damage than previously thought possible by a mere lamb. I was insane, and because of my technical skill and prowess, I absolutely avenged my cultists along the way. That'll teach anyone to come messing with my babies. I'm like a big mother bear, and I just caught you eating one of my cubs like a watermelon from the supermarket. I'm gonna be a little pissed. Maybe I'll even rip out your throbbing heart just like I did to Shamura after destroying them in the marketplace of ideas. And now, I had finally killed all of the bishops, and it was time to go meet with my totally nice and friendly overlord. Oh wait, he doesn't seem very friendly. Take back what's mine? Nah, I'm gonna kill this guy. He sucks. So, since I was in a bloodthirsty mood, I had to go gather my followers to open a portal to meet the fat cat himself. As I was approaching, I watched all of my followers get placed in cages, and I wanted to fight for them. So, I walked up to the giant cat and said, "No, lol." He got mad. Upon hearing this, the first of the cat's servants, Ball, approached me. And I was like, man, what's the other one's name? Dick. You know, like, Dick and Ball. Oh, man. Well, I mean, I was pretty disappointed to find out that his name was actually Aim, which, I mean, in my mind, sounded a bit more like lame. Hey, tough crowd, tough crowd. Anyway, I killed both of the servants pretty easily, but when the big boss came after me, I got spanked like an ass. So I did the most logical thing I could think of and just kept trying until I won. Eventually, I beat the big cat, but why would I think that was all? Now I entered into a hellscape where all of my followers were being crucified. Pretty metal, I guess. The cat's face peeled away, and suddenly I was forced to fight a few giant floating eyeballs. Luckily, I'm a man who has killed a lot of giant floating eyeballs in video games, so this was no big deal for me. With my professionalism in the field, I was eventually able to defeat the one who waits, and as an added bonus, I was also able to force him into my cult. And with the one who waits as a new member in my cult, I got to thinking, this dude's immortal, and every story I read calls immortality a curse. So why don't I help this little guy out? So I gathered my cultists, and together we opened a portal to the Eternal Blender and finally set him free. With all finally said and done, I was finally given free reign to just go and enjoy the life of a cult leader. I could finally tend to all of my subjugated followers and have them do as I please. Maybe even take the Benjamin Franklin route and take an NSFW turn with this cult. And with all of this freedom finally open to me, I finally had the choice. And I decided to close the game because damn, I've got a video to edit, a script to write, a thumbnail to make, damn it, some shorts to run, and a live stream tonight. I have over 200 subscribers to make this video for, so I gotta go. In all seriousness, I thought this game was actually fire, and I would recommend it to anybody interested. I thought the roguelike gameplay was super fun, even though it was pretty bare bones. I kinda skipped over the whole town building section of the game, but I still had a ton of fun. So that probably speaks volumes about how well-rounded of a game this is. Fire game, would recommend.